Gather close, dear souls, for tonight on Story Soul Secrets, we wander the torchlit cloisters of 4th century Rome, a world where the echoes of empire fade into the chants of monks, and sacred scrolls whisper truths long buried under layers of dogma. Picture this: crumbling vellum pages stained with the ghosts of ancient inks, revealing a feast not of bread and wine, but of hidden recipes etched by apostles' own hands, codes that unravel crimes of faith, jealousy, and betrayal, only to illuminate roads to grace. Or image this: a humble brother's trembling fingers stirring a pot of barley stew under flickering candlelight, as spectral voices rise from the steam, confessing sins that could shatter the early church. This is the tale of Brother Elias, a scribe whose rediscovery of the codex Apocrypha sparks a journey of shadowed suppers and soul-deep forgiveness. Let it educate you on the flavors of forgotten Judean hearts. Barley loaves baked fresh every other day from wheat and spelt, lentils simmered with wild cumin and onions from Galilee's fields, olive oil poured like liquid gold over humble fish from the Sea of Galilee. Entertain you with chills of divine intrigue that build like a storm over the Tiber, and inspire you to seek redemption in your own hidden recipes, those everyday stews of regret turned to renewal. Now lean in and let the aroma of revelation draw you near. The Eternal City in 382 AD was a tapestry of triumphs and tremors, a grand mosaic cracked by the weight of its own glory. The Colosseum's weathered arches loomed like the skeletal remains of a once ravenous beast, its sands still whispering of lions' roars and martyrs' defiant songs under emperors' long dust. The Tiber River slithered through the heart of Rome, its waters murky with the silt of forgotten aqueducts and the refuse of a million lives, merchants hawking spiced olives from Judean groves, senators in togas stained by intrigue, and slaves hauling amphorae of wine chilled in snow from Lebanon's peaks. Christianity, that fledgling faith born in the shadow of Roman crosses, had clawed its way from catacomb whispers to imperial decree. Emperor Theodosius's edict of 380 had declared it the realm's sole religion, banishing pagan gods to the footnotes of history. Churches sprouted like loaves in a yeast-kissed oven, basilicas of basilica stone rising amid forums where Jupiter's altars now gathered dust, their bells tolling over the clamor of chariot wheels and market cries. Yet beneath this veneer of victory lurked fractures. Heresy simmered in the alleys like overspiced stew, Arians clashing with Nicenes in theological brawls that echoed the old gladiatorial frenzies. Monastic life that anchor the soul offered refuge. Communities of black-robed brothers withdrawing to cloistered hills, their days a rhythm of prayer, labor, and the scratch of quills on vellum. In the scriptorium of a modest basilica on the Celian Hill, far from the golden pomp of St. Peter's under construction, Brother Elias embodied this quiet rebellion against chaos. At 40 summers, he was a wisp of a man, his frame lean from the monastic fasts that broke only with barley pottage or lentil broth thickened with onions and cucumbers, staples borrowed from Greek influences that had seeped into Judean hearts centuries before. His eyes, sharp as the eagle quills he favored for illumination, burned with a fire undimmed by the scriptorium's perpetual gloom. Ink-stained hands, calloused from grinding pigments, vermilion from crushed cinnabar, lapis from distant Afghan mines, had birthed golden halos around gospel saints, but his heart hungered for deeper truths. Elias's days unfolded in sacred cadence, the rule of Saint Benedict's precursor, guiding their flow even before its formal ink in 529. Matins at midnight, a chorus of psalms rising like mist from the chapel's cold stone. Lauds at dawn, breaking fast with bread baked fresh every second day from stone-ground wheat and spelt, its crust crackling under teeth like the promise of resurrection. Prime brought labor in the herb garden, oregano and mint clipped for the refectory stews, their aromas evoking the Mediterranean crossroads where Jewish, Roman, and Greek flavors had fused in first-century Judea. By terse, Elias retreated to the scriptorium, a vaulted chamber of whitewashed walls, its high windows slanting light like divine fingers onto slanted desks of oak, worn smooth by generations of elbows. Here, under the stern gaze of a frescoed St. Jerome, that fiery scholar exiled to Bethlehem's caves, wrestling Hebrew scrolls by lamplight, monks copied the Vetus Latina, the old Latin Bible riddled with inconsistencies, its Greek roots fraying like overused nets. Jerome himself, that tempest of a man born in 347 near Aquileia, had been Elias's distant lodestar. Commissioned by Pope Damasus in 382 to revise the Gospels, Jerome had delved into Greek manuscripts with a zeal that bordered on fury, scorning the Vetus Latina's barbarisms as unfit for the common tongue. Elias idolized him, not the irascible hermit who railed against Origen's heresies in treatises that scorched like desert winds, but the visionary who learned Hebrew from rabbis in Bethlehem, translating the Old Testament afresh from Semitic roots, birthing the Vulgate that would unify the Church's voice for a millennium. Clarity, fidelity, elegance, Elias would murmur, tracing Jerome's principles like a mantra, his own quill dipping into oak gall ink that stained fingers black as original sin. But inspiration's spark often flickers in the mundane, doesn't it, dear souls? For Elias, orphaned at 10 to the cloister's embrace after a Visigoth raid claimed his parents' farm near the Tiber, the scriptorium was both forge and confessional. A youthful lapse, a stolen glance at a visiting noblewoman's unveiled face, a vow bent under temptation's whisper, had scarred his soul, leaving doubts that no psalm could fully scour. Am I worthy of a word? He'd ponder in the night's vigil, stirring a simple broth of lentils and wild thyme over embers, the steam curling like unanswered prayers. Food in his monastic world was sacrament veiled, bread as body, wine as blood, but laced with Judean echoes, figs and pomegranates from the 7 species, sesame seeds ground into tahini-like pastes for Lenten fasts. He found solace in the kitchen's alchemy, kneading dough as prayer, spices as bridges to the apostles' world. Those fishermen and tax collectors, whose meals of salted fish and olive oil-soaked bread had fed multitudes, body and spirit alike. It was late autumn, leaves carpeting the cloister like fallen psalms in hues of ochre and rust, when fate's hand stirred the pot. The basilica's library, a vaulted annex to the scriptorium, stocked with scrolls salvaged from Alexandria's near catastrophe, before its flames in 391 devoured irreplaceable tomes, held crates of forgotten bounty. Elias, tasked with cataloging under Abbot Lucius's edict, preserve the pure, excise the profane, pried open a dust-shrouded bundle in the corner. Cobwebs parted like veils before a bride, revealing a codex unbound, its folios loose as autumn gusts, the feast before the feast, titled in bold Greek uncials, predating even the Dead Sea Scrolls whispers, a relic from first-century Judea, perhaps penned in the upper room of that fateful supper or a Galilee hideaway. Elias's breath hitched, a silent Deo gratias escaping parched lips. The script was apostolic, Peter's bold strokes in one margin, John's fluid curls in another, intertwined with Aramaic glosses, the tongue Christ spoke over loaves and fishes. But this was no arid theology, no dry enumeration of parables. Illustrations bloomed vivid under his touch. Sketches of a Last Supper variant, not Da Vinci's serene tableau, but a laden table groaning under the weight of first-century Judean fare. Barley flatbreads dusted with sesame, lentil stews simmered with wild cumin, onions, and cucumbers pickled in vinegar's sharp bite. grilled fish from the Sea of Galilee, their scales glistening like silver talents, clusters of dates sticky with guilt's residue, figs split open like confessional hearts, all anointed with olive oil from ancient presses unearthed at Ekron, where Philistines once crushed olives underfoot. Interwoven were recipes, cryptic as the riddles Christ posed to Pharisees. Take the bitter herb of remorse, wormwood from Galilee's hills, pound with tears of denial in a mortar of stone, bind in dough of contrition kneaded with barley flour, and bake under trial's heat till the crust cracks with forgiveness' steam. Symbols dotted the margins like stars in a prophetic sky, a fish for Peter's abundance and fall, a broken loaf for Judas's shattered trust, a rooster's comb for denial's crow, 30 olives clustered like silver coins for betrayal's toll. Inspiration kindled like a struck flint in Elias's chest, chasing shadows from his doubt-haunted heart. This was the story before the story, a pre-holy feast, the apostles' hidden confessions veiled in cuisine, their darkest crimes not as scandals to bury, but as ingredients in redemption's grand recipe. Peter's triple denial by the courtyard fire, hands warmed on Grace's betrayal. Judas's kiss in Gethsemane, 30 pieces glinting like olives in moonlight. Thomas's doubting thrust, spear hand piercing side for proof. Even John's eclipse of jealousy, coveting the beloved disciple's place. Matthew's tax thief past, ledgers stained with extortion's ink. These were no mere sins, but human fractures, mended in ritual meals shared in upper rooms. Stews simmered in tears, revealing ghosts who confessed, absolved by the breaking of bread. If apostles stumbled so and rose, Elias whispered to the flickering rushlight, then my own lapse is but a pinch of salt in the greater savor. Redemption isn't perfection, souls. It's the simmer that draws forth the sweet from the bitter. Yet education tempered his zeal with caution's cool hand. He knew the codex's peril. Apocryphal whispers like the gospel of Thomas's secret sayings or the acts of Paul's fantastical voyages, deemed hidden things by Jerome himself, who burned suspect texts in Bethlehem's caves to purify the canon. Heresy hunts prowled Rome's shadows, Arians exiled, Manichaeans flogged, the church forging its Vulgate sword to cleave truth from fable. Discovery could mean the flames, or worse, exile to some wind-lashed isle, quill forever stilled. But oh, the hook sinks deep here, doesn't it? As Elias traced a recipe for Thomas's doubting broth, fish bones simmered with wormwood and olive oil, stirred thrice against the grain to invoke unbelief's unraveling. A draught snuffed his candle, plunging the scriptorium into abyss black. Footsteps echoed in the cloister beyond, soft, deliberate, not the brother's familiar shuffle of sandals on flagstone, but a predator's pad, measured and menacing. Elias's heart thundered like a war drum in his ribs, pulse echoing the distant clamor of the forum's night watch. He slid the codex beneath his palate with a rustle faint as a sinner's breath, feigning sleep as the door's iron latch groaned in protest. Hinges creaked like old bones, and lamplight spilled in, a golden intruder slicing the dark. Brother Marcus, the abbot's golden-haired novice, slipped inside, his angelic face, framed by tonsured curls, belied by eyes sly as a fox scenting the henhouse. At 20, Marcus, with Elias's shadow and foil, orphaned like him, but risen swift through honeyed words and deft flattery, tending the library's locks with keys that whispered more secrets than they guarded. His habit, pristine where Elias's frayed at the hems, carried the faint scent of fresh ink and ambition's cologne. Brother Elias, still wrestling the word at this unholy hour. Marcus's voice dripped honey over gravel, his lantern raising shadows that clawed the walls like accusing fingers. He set it on a desk, The flame dancing across vellum stacks, Jerome's letters to Paula, railing against Origen's fables, Eusebius' histories, chronicling apostles' martyrdoms with clinical detachment. Elias stirred, propping on an elbow, feigning a yawn that masked his racing thoughts. The Vulgate calls Marcus. Jerome's fire burns late. His revisions to the Psalms alone could fill a novena with prayer. But Marcus's, the feast before isn't hidden to condemn, but to embrace. Our sins, like apostles, are but spices in the divine recipe, drawing forth sweetness unforeseen. Marcus nodded, eyes wide with newfound fire, but as the embers died to glow, his face shadowed. Elias, Father Lucius, must know. This could reform the refectory's fasts, weave these rites into lauds. Or, his voice trailed, hand straying to the pouch at his belt, where a scribe's knife glinted, tool for trimming quills or severing ties. Suspense hung heavy as the night's chill, the kitchen's door creaking faintly in the draught. Or raise the basilica, if deemed Gnostic folly, like those secret discourses Jerome scorched. Elias pressed the codex to his breast, heart a drum of dilemma. Reform? Lucius sees only threats, apocrypha, as weeds in Jerome's garden. Share wisely, brother, or we both taste the pyre's bitter relish. Dawn broke gold over Rome's 7 hills, the brothers scattering to matins like leaves before wind, chants of Gloria Patri, rising as they filed into chapel, habits brushing like whispers of conspiracy. Elias hid the codex in his cell's alcove, behind a loose stone that concealed not just parchment, but his soul's fragile hope. The journey had begun, a pilgrimage through peril's pantry, where each rite was a step deeper into the apostles' shadowed suppers. Days blurred into a syllabus of suspense, decoding by night in the scriptorium's hush, quill pausing as footsteps echoed too near, evading Lucius's probing homilies by day, the abbot's voice booming from the pulpit like thunder over Galilee. Purity through poverty, brothers. Shun the exotic, cling to the canon. While Elias's mind wandered to Wormwood's Pound, Olive's Pit, education wove through every clandestine stirring, the codex a tutor in antiquity's larder. The barley loaf's leavening mirrored resurrection's patient rise, flour ground between stones as in first-century mills, evoking the widow's might in every humble grain. Lentils' humility echoed the prodigal's husks, simmered with mint and oregano, Greek gifts to Judean tables, infusing layers of complexity, medicinal as the herb's ancient lore. They ventured beyond the basilica's walls for authenticity's sake, Marcus's keys unlocking garden gates under cover of none. At the forum's ruined edge, amid columns toppled like apostles' doubts, they brewed Thomas's doubting broth at noon zenith. Fish bones from the market's salted hull, steeped with wormwood bitter as unbelief. Olive oil swirled like the Spirit's descent. Steam billowed from a cauldron, coiling in the sun's glare to form the doubter's specter. Spear hand trembling, side pierced for proof, voice a rasp of regret. I thrust for certainty, brothers, yet from wound flowed wine of truth. Forgive the blade, taste the balm. Marcus wept openly, redemption's tears salting the broth, his ambition's knife forgotten in the moment's grace. But whispers spread like cumin on wind, novices muttering of kitchen apparitions in the lavabo splash, eyes turning accusatory at chapter house gatherings, where Lucius's gaze lingered like a hawk on hares. Suspense thickened like a roux left too long on flame, curdling trust at every turn. A week fled in fevered rites, John's eclipse stew, eggplant charred over coals with jealousy herbs, sumac tart as envy, revealing the beloved disciples' shadow covet, mended by a vision of shared light. Then came the crossroads, literal and dire. On the Appian Way's ancient stones, pocked by Caesar's legions, Marcus proposed the deepest plunge. One more, Elias, the Judas relish, in the catacombs chill. If ghosts absolve the betrayer, we confess to Lucius at vespers. Proof against his fire. Elias hesitated. The codex, heavy as lead in his satchel, but inspiration urged. What if this is our Pentecost, brother? Crimes decoded not to damn, but to dine together in truth's feast. The catacombs yawned beneath the Via Appia, a labyrinth of bone-lined tunnels honeycombed with martyrs' niches, Peter's fisherman kin, Paul's tent-maker converts, their relics shrouded in dust like forgotten recipes. Air hung stale as unspoken sins. Lanterns flicker, casting elongated shades that danced like demons on loculi walls. In a shadowed alcove, far from tourist torches, they kindled a brazier, its coals glowing like eyes in judgment. Elias unpacked the rite. Sorrel gathered from Tiber banks, steeped in vinegars weep sharp as Gethsemane's betrayal. 30 olives, pitted like eyes averting truth, their brine evoking silver's gleam. Pounded to paste in a clay bowl etched with fish symbols, the mixture fermented under their breaths, the lament chanted low, the kiss that sold the light, 30 talents for night's embrace. Steam rose as they heated the paste over embers, coiling thick and aromatic, laced with olive oil's golden thread. It billowed, enveloping the alcove like a shroud woven of regret, forming Judas's form, noose-shadowed throat, coins glinting on outstretched tongue like cursed jewels. Greed choked me silent, the vision rasped, voice echoing off bones like wind through reeds. The kiss a poison fruit, fellowship's fracture for mammon's lie. But the relish, it cleanses the palate. Eat and be free of avarice's noose, spread it on bread, and taste the betrayer's path to pardon. Marcus reached for the bowl, fingers trembling with awe, but faltered, his other hand flashing to the belt pouch, drawing the scribe's knife with a whisper of steel on leather. Suspense crested like a wave crashing catacomb walls, the air electric as pre-thunder hush. The abbot knows Elias. Marcus hissed, blade catching lantern gleam, poised not for olives but throats. He cornered me at Compline, the Alexandrian crate novice, whispers of feasts and ghosts. Fetch it or share your own shadows. This heresy threatens the Vulgate's purity, Jerome's labor, Damasus's decree. Your feasts invite chaos, apostles as criminals mocking the canon. Elias backed against ossuary stone, codex clutched like a shield of vellum and vine, heart of bellows forging fear to fury. Criminals? I, human as we, Peter denied yet. Led the flock. Judas fell, yet his code teaches greed's folly, a warning spiced for the wise. This isn't Gnostic veil, Marcus. It's the messy meal birthing miracle, the story before the sanitized script, where redemption simmers raw and real. The ghost interceded, steam lash ensnaring Marcus's wrist like tendrils of divine mercy, the knife clattering to dust-silt floor amid bone fragments. Choose, betrayer reborn, Judas's echo intoned, coins dissolving to dates cloying sweetness on his tongue. As I chose poorly, will you sell light for ambition's shadow or taste the relish of release? Marcus crumpled, knife forgotten, sobs racking his frame like a novitiate's first scourging. Forgive. Lucius tempted with archdeacon stole, visions of Jerome's seat in Bethlehem's echo. But you've shown grace's true taste, Elias, bitter as wormwood yet sweet as forgiven figure. Inspiration flooded the tomb then, warm as oil on wounds, a torrent of light piercing the gloom, illuminating shelves of relics like stars in night's kitchen. Together, they completed the rite, fingers dipping into the relish, tart as regret's vinegar, brined with olive's earth, spread on unleavened bread that cracked like dawn over Calvary. Visions cascaded in steam's embrace, apostles' full confessional unfolding, James's favoritism eclipsed by sibling stew, Matthew's ledgers balanced in tax thief tart, each crime a course met with recipe's grace, a path for every palate scarred by fall. The catacombs chill yielded to inner fire as they emerged, changed men. Codex no longer contraband but covenant, its pages pulsing with purpose. Marcus, redeemed blade turned plowshare, vowed silence till the moment ripened. We'll present it as Jerome might, a revision, not revolution. Feasts enriching the Vulgate's margins. They returned under starlit vaults, the Appian Way's ghosts nodding approval, but suspense lingered like aftertaste. Lucius's spies in every shadow, novices' murmurs swelling to rumor. Weeks wove onward, rites ripening in secrecy. Andrew's net of neglect, a fish stew with neglected herbs, dill wilted long, revived in brine, summoning the apostles' overlooked labors, mended by communal catch. Each decoding dug deeper into the title's promise, crimes not cloaked in shame, but unveiled as steps on redemption's stair, apostles' frailties the flower dusting our own journeys. Elias's doubt dissolved fully one eve in the herb garden, under moon's benevolent gaze, stirring a pot of Mary's anointing balm, myrrh and nard blended with olive oil, poured over feet weary from wandering. The steam conjured not crime, but quiet witness, a woman's lavish love amid men's bluster. See, Elias breathed to Marcus, oil slick on palms. Even the overlooked redeem, our lapses, like hers, anoint the path. Yet the abbot's net tightened, suspense a snare snapping shut. Lucius summoned them to his solar at nones, chamber austere as a stylight's pillar. Walls bare save a Vulgate leaf framed in ebony, air thick with myrrh incense, masking suspicion's sweat. Rumors, brothers, feasts in catacombs, ghosts from pots. The Alexandrian crate yields heresy. Does it? Speak, or the pyre awaits, as Jerome burned the basilide's dregs. Marcus paled, hand twitching toward absent knife, but Elias stepped forward, codex proffered like a chalice. Not heresy, Father, revelation. The feast before, apostles' humanity, coded in hearts we all tend. Peter's denial in dough's rise, Judas's toll in Olive's pit, not to mock the canon, but mirror it, showing redemption's recipe for every soul. Lucius's face, lined as ancient scroll, twisted fury, fear. He snatched the codex, folios fluttering like trapped birds, eyes devouring a page. The rooster's crow recipe, steamed spectral plea. Apocryphal venom. Jerome revised for clarity, not phantoms. This panders to Manichaean fancies, apostles as sinners unbound. He rose, bellowing for guards, scriptorium brothers, their quills now potential pyres. But Marcus interposed, voice steady as anchor in gale. Test it, Father. As Thomas thrust for proof, brew the broth, summon the ghost. If fraud, burn us. If truth, enrich the church as Jerome enriched the tongue. Suspense peaked in the refectory that vespers, the basilica's heart. Trestles cleared, coals raked high. Brothers assembled in murmuring throng, 50 souls, from grizzled Cenobites to wide-eyed oblates. their habits a sea of black under rafters echoing with doubt. Lucius presided, codex open on lectern like accused at tribunal, his knife, now ceremonial, poised to slash. Elias and Marcus prepared under scrutiny's blaze, barley dough kneaded public, tears mingling openly. Elias for his lapse, Marcus for ambition's lash, Lucius's own unspoken, a novice's seduction long buried. The oven roared, stew bubbled, stir thrice widdershins, and steam surged, a pillar of vapor veiling the hall like Sinai's cloud. Shapes formed in the mist, Peter first, rooster at heel, then chorus. Judas with olive branch noose, Thomas spear-sheathed, John eclipse-free. We stumbled as men, they chorused, voices harmonic as monastic chant, denied, betrayed, doubted, yet rose in the breaking, the pouring, the tasting. Feed as we fed, crimes as crust, redemption the crumb within. The hall gasped, crosses clutched, tears flowing freer than Tiber's spring flood. Lucius staggered, codex slipping to knees, his stern facade cracking like overbaked loaf. He dipped trembling spoon into stew, sipped, and wept. By Jerome's grace, it's true. The feast before, the messy prelude to miracle. Climax cascaded in Revelation's flood. The codex integrated, not burned but bound into the basilica's chain. Rites woven into refectory rhythms. Suppers schooled in soul spices. Whispers reach Jerome in Bethlehem, or so legend spins, enriching Vulgate margins with veiled glosses, though officially apocryphal. Its spirit leavened the faith like yeast in dough. Elias rose to lore keeper, Marcus his Sioux-spirit, their basilica a haven. Where Lenten lentils told of loss, Easter loaves of rise. Brother Elias lived to silver hairs, they say, his recipes recited in cloisters from Monte Cassino to Vivarium Scriptoria, proving darkest crimes, when decoded with courage, paved paths luminous as dawn over Jordan. Entertainment in the ethereal chills, education in edible antiquity, inspiration eternal. Your hidden feasts, souls, simmer with similar secrets. Stir them, and watch redemption rise. And so, dear souls, as catacomb steam fades to memory's mist, reflect. What pre-holy recipe bubbles in your life? Crimes unspoken, apostles' echoes in your everyday broth. In 382's shadowed Rome, Elias decoded not damnation, but dinner's divine invitation. Frailties as flavors grace the grand finale. May it stir your spirit to taste anew, forgive afresh. Until our next unveiling from history's hearth on Story Soul Secrets, sup boldly, redeem deeply. Pax Vobiscum.